industries, and well, just taking a review of the other sectors as well that didn't perform too well. So the credit to manufacturing that we were looking at, well, let's begin with the top performers in this case. The building and construction industry rose from 13.1% in 2014 to 13.6% in 2015, while agriculture grew as well from 3.5% in 2014 to about 6.2% in 2015, and manufacturing as well, actually declined. That's what we are looking at right there, from 3.5% in 2014 to 3.2% that we are looking at, but still it was among the best performers. And looking at the poor performers there, accommodation and food services in 2015 slowed actually by about 1.3%, and information technology as well did slow by 7.3%, and crimes that we are looking at increased in Kenya between 2014 and 2015. Actually, in 2015, crimes increased to about 72,490, representative of about 4.5% increase in crime. Let's now take a look at other poor performers. We're looking at tourism. The earnings as well, reduced, or at least went down by 2.5 billion shillings, from 87.1 billion in 2014 to 84.6 billion in 2015. Coffee marketed productions as well did go down from 16.6 billion shillings in 2014 to 12 billion shillings in 2015, representative of a reduction of 27.4%. And maize market value as well went down from 9.6 billion shillings in 2014 to 8.5 billion shillings in 2015, representative of 11.4% reduction. Now let's take a look at the other performers as well. Credit to manufacturing actually grew between 2014 and 2015. In fact, it went up in 2015 to about 290 billion shillings from 2014's 237.4 billion. And transport and storage as well grew in 2015 to 951.4 billion shillings from 894.1 billion in 2014, while the educational institutions as well went up from 79,641 to about 83,336. They actually represent about 4.6% increase in 2015. So we're looking at the good and the bad, both in the economic survey. But joining us now is Peter Biwott, who is the head of research, policy and advocacy at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Jay.
Well, looking at the bad side of Kenya is that manufacturing, while it was among the best performers, actually didn't grow that much between 2014 and 2015. But what do you make out of that performance?
Yeah, thank you very much, Joy. Probably maybe I need to set the record straight in terms of manufacturing. And actually, if you look at manufacturing in 2014, it was actually 10% share of GDP. But if you look at the outcome of economic survey, manufacturing share of GDP actually grew to 10.3. So it didn't actually decline, but it actually grew. And but of course, you cannot look at the sector only maybe just looking at 2 years. What you need to do is to develop a trend over the period, maybe 10 years. And if you look at an average share of manufacturing sector in the last 10 years, it has actually been 11% if you do an average. 11%,
but also if you look at the World Bank report, it also said that manufacturing has stagnated in the past decade, because they also did, a 10-year report that they released actually not far from today. If I'm not mistaken, it was in the month of March, and it did show that manufacturing and agriculture had stagnated over the past 10 years. So what do we need to do as a country to grow these sectors?
Probably maybe just to still discuss, the same issue of growth in the manufacturing sector. Actually, the World Bank report is quite accurate. Government reports are also quite accurate. If you look at the Kenya Industrial Transformation Program, it did actually provide that the sector stagnated for a period of the last decade. And that's why going forward, what government is now aspiring to do is to grow that sector by an additional 15% share of GDP. So what we need to do to be able to grow this sector actually is to be able to look at critical elements which actually support manufacturing. If you look at for example, our trade, we tend to be importing even products which we can actually be able to produce in our country.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we have done as much as we could to promote exports of value-added products from the manufacturing sector. But if you look at it critically, actually, if you look at the economic survey, it talks about an increase in terms of exports actually. And this is where the growth of the manufacturing sector actually is largely based on. What we need to do is to put more incentives into encouraging competitiveness in the sector. If you look at why we are not competitive, you still realize that despite the fact that we have done so much in terms of even prioritizing and saying, okay, this sector, manufacturing sector is supposed to be the sector which is going to take Kenya to the next level.
Right.
We've not done well in terms of looking at the, the cost of doing business. Even as we move to devolution, there are also issues of the import declaration fees, which are still being subjected to manufacturers.
All right. There's an ongoing, ease of doing business conference in Nairobi at the moment that is bringing together over 20 countries from around Africa. And, one of the challenges that we continue to face is duplication of licenses as well. And the Cabinet Secretary for Industrialization has mentioned that Kenya is looking to actually eliminate the duplication of these licenses. But do you think it's one of the deterring factors to growing the manufacturing industry?
Thank you very much. I think looking at that issue, the issue of the cost, the doing business indicators,
right.
This is an issue actually where even the country has done so much because our aspiration is to be top 50 maybe in the next 5 years. But looking at that measure, it's not enough. And that's why you're talking about looking at the broader business environment. And there's a lot of, with the coming in of devolution, there's a lot of multiplicity of institutions.
Right.
There's a lot of duplication of licenses, fees and charges. And as we focus on improving our rating in terms of doing business indicators, we really need to, as a country, if we want to promote manufacturing and business at large, we really need to look into, reviewing these, licenses and coming up with national legislation, because as we speak today, there is no, national legislation which actually helps to harmonize some of these, fees and charges and business regulations. And this is something, as a country, we really need to thoroughly look at if we have to grow our manufacturing sector. I just also wanted to speak about, the growth of the economy. We are among, leading growing economies as we speak today in Africa.
Yes,
if you look
third
at
most improved.
third most improved, yeah. If you look at Kenya's economic growth since 2010, if you take an average, it actually comes to 5.95%, which is, we can say, 6%. This year, we have been able to grow from 5.3 to, 5.6, and this is a good, growth prospect. But you need to look at, the country's aspirations in the Vision 2030.
Right.
When we came up with the Vision 2030 in 2008, we aspired through the economic pillar that Kenya is going to grow at about 10%, double digit. Because for a country to transform into a higher middle income, if you look at other case studies, because there are only 13 countries in the whole world who have actually been able to grow at that rate, including China and Botswana here in Africa. To be able to, transform the economy to that level, then the country has to grow, at double digits. And that is why, even when we want to grow the manufacturing sector, if you look at, the growth of 5.6, we are among the top growing countries in Africa. But the question is it enough? What do we need to do so that we can do and achieve what we have actually said in the Kenya Industrial Transformation Master Plan?
All right. So when you look also at, some of the statistics that have been given, Kenya has also been affected by external shocks, and that are actually inevitable to an extent. But do you think that external shocks as well have slowed down the economy in the past 2 years?
Definitely, because we are in a global market. This is an era of globalization. We're talking about free trade. And our country has done so much in terms of, partnerships with other countries. We know we are a member of the East African Community. We are a member of the tripartite free trade area in Africa. We are also a member of so many other economic blocs, and therefore we trade with other countries. And if you look at our trade statistics, our country has been able to, import rapidly than export. And although if you look at the economic survey, our trade deficit actually declined to about 900 billion Kenya shillings from 1.1 trillion. You know, which is a good sign, but still it shows that we are highly dependent on the global market, and that is why when recession hits the dominant, you know, countries in the world, just like the United States of America, you know, dollar is an internationally recognized currency. That is how now our country's even manufacturing sector is affected. And these are some of the things we need to look as a country. When we talk about free trade, what does it mean? We need, based on the agreements we have actually done, either the WTO, World Trade Organization, or regional trading arrangements which we have done in Africa, there are provisions which actually provide for countries like ours, which is a developing country, to safeguard themselves against certain imports. If you believe certain goods, like goods or sectors, like the manufacturing sector, is key for our economy, we can actually be able to, you know, enforce safeguards. And as we enforce safeguards, what we need to do is to ensure that we put the right, you know, strategies in place, so that within that provided period of time, we can be able to create competitiveness in our sectors, especially manufacturing. We can be able to develop in terms of acquisition of technology. And this has been done by many countries, and it works.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Peter Biwott, for talking to us about what exactly is happening in the Kenyan economy. Wish we had more time to talk about this specific issue, but I guess there's always a second time to come over and talk to us about the numbers. Peter Biwott is the head of policy, research, and advocacy at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, talking to us about the economic gains and losses and what we need to do to further grow the economy from the current 5.6%, and maybe we could hit 6.1%, like President Uhuru Kenyatta did estimate that the country could reach maybe by end of 2016. Well, we've come to the end of the show, but there are two major events happening today. Of course, one of them happens to be the rescue mission ongoing at Huruma, where the collapsed building, is in Nairobi's Huruma area. And we're looking at the number of people who have been declared dead, being placed at 36, and over 135 people have been rescued from there and are receiving treatment at the different areas. 79 people still missing, if we are going to include the lady who's just about to be rescued or could have been rescued by now at that collapsed building, who is stuck in the rubble. But there's also another big event, that is the 2/3 gender rule happening in Parliament, and in News Hour we're going to be having that conversation, or at least crossing over to the National Assembly to see what exactly is going on there. Major important, ruling there that could take place today. But let's now, cross over to the other studio where News Hour is just about to happen.